The Honourable, the member for Stephenville-Port.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and it's a pleasure to rise and speak to Bill number 6, an act to amend the Professional Fish Harvesters Act. And much like my colleague, the Minister of Fisheries, and again the member opposite, member for Cape St. Francis, just to start by acknowledging the great work of the Professional Fish Harvesters Certification Board. And in addition to that, the staff in fisheries that have done some work in looking at amending this act. And generally speaking, we are just doing some housekeeping items today, but it certainly is important. And some of the housekeeping items, in addition to simply wording, we're also looking at some positive changes as well. I had some brief experiences actually with the Professional Fish Harvesters Certification Board in my role as an employment counsellor, and I would help individuals who are seeking retraining to go on and do their MED-A1 and their MED-A3, and as yourself, Madam Speaker, would be familiar with as well, as we both served in that capacity. And at every opportunity, the Professional Fish Harvester Certification Board was a pleasure to deal with, a pleasure to work with, and so were the individuals seeking training in that capacity. And as mentioned, I mean, the Professional Fish Harvester Certification Board being the first area of its kind in '96, actually under a Liberal government, which is important to note, the Act being the first of its kind at the time. And that board was really meant to establish and recognizing the professionals in the industry and the great work that they do, and really putting a professional standard to the occupation. In addition to that, they'd be providing an advisory role to the federal government and to the provincial government, and they'd be operating the registration system as well. In addition to that, again, the educational opportunities were quite frequent, and they continue to be ongoing to this day. Designations, level 1, level 2, apprentice, and so on and so forth. And of course, as the member for Cape St. Francis mentioned, the safety and the promoting of safety training is of paramount importance as well. So the legislative amendments here that we're looking at this evening, again, just updating some wording. One of the key things I think that we're really looking at here as well in terms of the composition of the board is very important. And so no longer do we have the Federal Department of Human Resources and Development. So outside of that role there, we're looking at an Aboriginal representative, and I think that's very important, and I think we all recognize the importance of Aboriginals in our society, and particularly Aboriginals of Newfoundland and those that partake in the fishing industry. And so to apply an Aboriginal lens as a member to the board, I think that's certainly a great step in the right direction. In addition to that, we're looking at allowing some members to serve after the expiry of their date until they're reappointed or replaced. And this is just to ensure the ongoing operation and efficiency of the board. Again, we don't want to be in a position where the board drops to a certain level of members and they're no longer able to continue with their ongoing daily operations. So it's just essentially about efficiency there. We're also going to delay the appointments of a disciplinary board until a complaint is received, and I think that's just a common sense kind of amendment here, really. There's really no need to have a disciplinary board unless a complaint is received when you look at another board getting together. Speaking of the word board, actually, that was the one that really stuck out at me the most in reviewing some of this legislation, and it was kind of really around the wording. And so the wording of the Act is where it's going to change in 3 or 4 different sections, and unless you're really paying close attention, you wouldn't notice it. But basically, throughout the Act, it refers to board, and you can appeal to the board, and we don't know what board that's actually referring to in the Act. So the Act is kind of referring it to now, so you can appeal to the appeal board as opposed to appeal to the board. You don't know what board you're appealing to, because under the Professional Fish Harvester Certification Board, there is an appeal board and a disciplinary board as well. So some minor tweaking there, just essentially around wording. In addition to that, some of the changes around the representatives from the federal government. So the current legislation states that we'll have 2 representatives from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. And so we're going to replace that now with 2 representatives from the federal government. And as the Minister of Fisheries had acknowledged, I think that's important because we all understand that it's more than just the Department of Fisheries and Oceans that plays a role in looking at fisheries in the province. So again, Transportation and Safety Department from the federal government could play a role around the size of the boats. It could be a Department of Environment official if we need be. So it really just allows for a more open and flexible opportunity to allow members from the federal government to play a role. In addition to that, we're just looking at ensuring that the number of the board does not fall below 11 members, again, to ensure the ongoing operation of the board. Just some minor stuff there as well. And then again, as well, when it looks at when the term of a member of an appeal board expires, he or she will continue to be a member until the member is reappointed or replaced. And this is something that we kind of just have to do right now, because as members are aware, and the members opposite are aware as well, we're still in the process of putting through the legislation around the Independent Appointments Commission. And so until that time, we need to ensure that the ongoing operation of this board is still intact and its integrity still remains as well. Other than that, again, simply just a housekeeping item, some minor cleanup. I would like to think that we'd have cooperation from all members on our side as well as members opposite, members of the third party, in ensuring that the minor amendments to Bill 6 here will pass with ease. There's really not much more up for debate than that. This is not a controversial bill. Again, this is a bill just simply to ensure that some of these housekeeping items are cleaned up. I think the last time the bill had any minor amendments was 2004. There may have been some other amendments in 96, 97 when it was first introduced. But outside of that, today we're essentially just doing some good housekeeping items. So in concluding, I'd like to thank the members of the Professional Fish Harvester Certification Board, as well as the Minister of Fisheries and his staff, and the great work that they've done in ensuring that we recognize the professionalism of those involved, of fish harvesters, and of individuals and fisher persons all across our province. And with that, I'll take my time and just again to say extend my thanks, and I would hope that the members opposite would agree in participating and agreeing that these are some good amendments to Bill number 6. Thank you, Madam Speaker.